Listen.
Posłuchaj.
Écoute.
ママ聞いてください
Escucha. MCO.
Listen.
MCO.
MCO.
Between the bars.
Oh, I have hands.
Yeah.
I have real hands.
Congratulations.
My God. Except
But they're hollow.
they're hollow. I can look into my hands. And they got chalk on, that's good. I have real hands. And I can close and open them. Whoa. My God, look at the view. This is insane. I'm looking out over a massive canyon. And if I step off this, I'm hundreds of meters up. Then thankfully I don't fall hundreds of meters down, but it looks like I would. Okay, so how do
The
I...
edge of the carpet is 200 meters down.
The edge. Oh, that's scary. Okay.
I'm still here. Welcome again to Between the Bars and the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. That was me, about 1,000 meters up a sheer rock face in the Grand Canyon National Park, having bags of fun, experiencing it from the relative safety and comfort of the living room of my neighbour Martin in Malmö, Sweden. Wearing the latest virtual reality headset, I was immersed in a spectacular once-in-a-lifetime environment that only the world's top professional climbers would normally get to experience. Some people travel long distances to look at these ancient natural rock formations. The rest of us get to watch them on the TV. It reminds me of a story a while ago now. The Mahler Chamber Orchestra was in residence with conductor Daniel Harding at the Opera Festival of Aix-en-Provence in the south of France. We had a keen amateur rock climber in the orchestra, Swedish violinist and conductor Fredrik Bostedt. He was climbing in the Massif de Calanque, a wild and rugged terrain just next to the picturesque port town of Cassis. Fredrik's good, but anything can happen, and he fell at least 7 to 10 meters before the harness and safety rope caught his body and swung it into the rock face. Well, Fredrik made it into the orchestra pit for that evening's performance of Mozart's Figaro, but his entire back was black and blue, and from what I remember, the doctors had to pump him full of morphine. While playing a concert can't be put in the same bracket of danger as climbing a rock face, there are other reasons you might want to experience an orchestra from the comfort of your virtual reality goggles. Think back to the last time you went to a concert. Classical, pop, jazz, whatever. Sitting listening from a respectable safe distance in the hall. Now remember the last time you walked up to an orchestra during a concert and proceeded to move amongst the players as they performed, immersed in the musical conversation and looking back out at the audience from next to your newfound colleagues. Well, there have actually been a few projects around the world that I know of where a couple of audience members got the privilege to sit on stage inside an orchestra during a concert. But there have probably been about as many humans out orbiting the Earth. And, unlike astronauts, there are no breathtaking spacewalks to be had on stage during a live concert in, say, the Elbphilharmonie, Hamburg. You have to sit utterly still and silent for fear of distracting what has to be the most remarkable and intricate machine created by humans for humans, the orchestra. But what if you could experience walking round inside an orchestra?
As musicians, you get this perspective which is very, very unique, and not a lot of people that walk this planet actually get this experience of being inside an orchestra and to experience these whole compositions very spatially.
To have a mask on and to get close to each musician was super exciting, even me as a professional musician. So I could just imagine for people who have only experience from big hall or maybe no experience at all, to have this possibility to listen to music and to walk close, hear the sound nearby, really cool.
Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's String Quintet in G minor, composed in Vienna nearly 250 years ago, and performed here by members of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra, as heard through a virtual reality headset, from the perspective of you, the listener-viewer, being able to walk through the ensemble between the musicians at will. The voices you just heard were Henrik Oppermann and the Swedish violinist Johannes Lörstad. Johannes leads the second violins of the MCO and had just taken off an Oculus Quest 2 headset after his first immersion into the MCO Mozart VR experience. Henrik Oppermann, who spoke first, is Mahler Chamber Orchestra's newest artistic partner. He's the creator of the Mozart VR experience. And, along with such illustrious performers as pianists Mitsuko Uchido and Leif of Ansnest, violinist Pekka Kuusisto, and conductors Daniela Gatti and Daniel Harding, Henrik will help to define some of our future artistic goals at the Mahler Chamber Orchestra, and specifically the ones to do with you, the public, getting closer to the orchestra. But Henrik is not a musician. He's never conducted an orchestra, and as far as I'm aware, he doesn't have a world-class singing voice. What he does have is the future in his hands, and the future is digital immersion. Henrik Oppermann is a pioneer of what's called immersive 3D sound. If you feel you're already starting to drown in technical terms, you have my sympathies. But listen, it's not that hard to explain. Digital immersion is simply the way us humans can get thoroughly immersed in any form of digital environment. Whether it's playing a game on your computer, or taking a video on your smartphone, or climbing a digital rock face projected in front of your eyes by a pair of advanced VR goggles. Now, immersive 3D sound, that's how our ears experience and navigate their way through these environments. And in fact, your ears can be immersed and navigated through any environment on Earth. Henrik has worked on stunning audio recreations of environments as diverse as tropical rainforests, inside Formula One racing cars, in hospitals, and even urban war zones. To conjure these environments into existence through technologies such as 3D sound and VR is to allow the next generation of audience, that's you, to experience what the professionals do. Surgeons, racing drivers, rock climbers, and musicians. But you can also experience things that are in danger of disappearing, such as tropical bird species in their natural habitat. And you can be put in the middle of a living hell, like Syrians in refugee camps trapped by war. Henrik Oppermann has been to and sound mapped all these environments. He can transport your ears and eyes to the worst and the best places on Earth. For the musicians at MCO, that means he will transport you through VR inside our holiest of holy spaces. The orchestra. That's what this episode is all about. Thank you, Mozart, and thank you, Joel, Florent, Stefan, Anna, and Tim. So what is virtual reality, or VR? I asked Henrik first for his personal definition and got some intriguing historical context, focused on the United States of America and its relationship with everything that's virtual reality, from headsets to politics to social media.
My personal definition of virtual reality is that it enables you to experience things that you can't experience in your everyday life. it enables you to be transported to places which you can't get to, in the same way as we work in the orchestra to basically break the line in between the conductor and the audience, that you're actually being transported into the orchestra. VR has been around for a while, and the big problem was always processing power and latency issues. So that means when you move your head inside a VR headset and the picture is not following in real time, your balance system is being confused and you get motion sickness. The same effect as you could experience on a boat, just a bit stronger. So all these techniques which were available in the 90s and earlier and before 2000s, they all had this latency issue of this slight delay in between your movement and the picture. And then there was this guy coming along, Lucky Palmer, who's a very interesting and questionable person who got into the spotlight also politically a little bit, because he spent a lot of money in these online campaigns against the Democrats and pro-Republicans. But he basically designed the Oculus headset, the first kit, the DK1. And this was a Kickstarter campaign, which was then heavily funded by basically people online. And he was able to kickstart everything off that. And then the DK2 came along and everything developed quite quickly. Until then, Facebook came along and basically bought for a massive amount of money Oculus and now integrates it into their, like last week, it's been announced that it's Meta and they're going to build a metaverse, which is basically all coming from this Oculus acquisition. So they're forcing really VR into their everyday life.
Facebook bought Oculus in 2014, and suddenly VR went mainstream. In the next 5 years, virtual reality exploded onto the market, and classical orchestras started to pay attention. By 2019, technology was ready to offer an audience the first truly cinematic classical music VR experience. You're listening to Mambo from West Side Story, performed by conductor Gustavo Dudamel and the Mahler Chamber Orchestra as part of Symphony, a groundbreaking project that used VR to place you, the public, at the very heart of an orchestra, inside a trumpet, inside a violin, standing right next to a conductor. And through VR goggles, your eyes and ears were digitally immersed in these environments. You couldn't walk around yet, that was still in the future, but you could at least look around. It was a start. Henrik Oppermann was in charge of capturing the immersive 3D sound for the Symphony experiment, and it's here he first met the MCO.
It's very interesting because the Symphony project with Dudamel and the MCO, it was a very special project, and in a large scale. It was an experiment for everyone because it wasn't done like that before. And there were quite a lot of learnings, I think, from everyone. From my side, specifically with these large scale recordings in the immersive world, which weren't done like that before, not to my knowledge. And then I guess also for the orchestra to see like, okay, this is actually happening and it's interesting, and you can generate content which is reaching young audiences, and it's also valuable for education in that sense. And pretty much on a personal level with the people from the MCO, it just clicked, and we were all connecting on these days, and it was a very nice connection which worked immediately. Basically, I exchanged contacts with Matti at the end, and somehow it went up from there, and we started talking, and then everything became clear quite quickly that we are facing the same goals, and that we want to explore and do research within this immersive realm to see what it can do for us.
From striking up a friendship with our beloved stage manager and Between the Bars producer Matthias Meyer, to building a relationship with the MCO as a whole, I ask Henrik what he thinks an artistic partnership should look like.
I see the artistic partnership really a lot like a friendship, like looking together in the same direction, and the willingness to explore and basically going the extra mile, and to not question everything, but looking into everything we do together to reevaluate and see like how can we translate it into new technologies, into new experiences, and also to be open-minded, specifically in the classical music world. I think it's very much about doing things like they always were. And the MCO is very specific in their setup, and that you have a lot of talented and young people which are very much open-minded. And this is also why I want to be with the MCO and exploring it, because you can't find that anywhere else, in my opinion. It's not about finding a replacement for the live experience. This will always be the bread and butter, and you can't replace it with anything, because it's so valuable and it's so emotional. But we can try to get closer with these other experiences, which are an add-on to it, and which maybe are nice teasers to bring more people and more young people into the concert halls. I think the whole artistic partnership is a lot not knowing where we will arrive, but we will find out on the way.
So we're going on a journey of discovery. We don't know exactly where or what it will lead to, but we will find out on the way. It would be lovely if one could just leave it at that. The inquisitive orchestra and the innovative sound scientist fly off into the future to boldly go where no classical music experience has been before. But virtual reality and the virtual universe is a super complex, groundbreaking concept beyond cutting edge, especially for classical audiences and the famously conservative classical music world. I would hazard a guess that most people in our profession, and I include myself here, have no clue about the feel of, the function of, or the inside workings of VR. Traditional ways of listening to music, like the old mono radio or the stereo hi-fi system, we can get our heads and our ears around, so to speak. They've been there for generations. Henrik Oppermann's journey, on the other hand, will take us somewhere different altogether. You're going to have to switch off your radios and your hi-fis, get up from your fireside armchairs and stretch sofas, even leave the plush audience seating of the concert hall. You're going to enter the world of 3D sound. Something new? Not really. 3D sound, or immersive 3D sound, as I explained earlier, is what you experience every day of your life. It's your daily environment, as you hear it and as you experience it. And it's vital to making sense of the virtual reality experience. Henrik explains.
In virtual reality, you need to have 3D sound in order to make sense of your surrounding, because with our eyes, we're just having a certain degree on what we're seeing. But like our ears, they constantly hear 360 and we can make sense of it. And we also can't shut our ears, we can shut our eyes, but like we're constantly having a 3D environment. So it does make sense to create sound in an immersive way, which is completely enveloping you. So in that sense, it is just natural. And in the recording history, we came with mono, and then the next big revolution was stereo. It's kind of already a 3D format if it's done right, but just to one side. And so we're now facing the next revolution in audio, which is then going into this immersive audio experience. And it basically gives us the picture on how we're listening to our environment naturally 24/7.
To help us realize just how important ears are to making sense of our environment, let us for a moment think of a fly. It understands its surroundings by being able to see 360 degrees all the time. It can't close its eyes. We humans, on the other hand, understand our environment by hearing 360 degrees continuously. Your ears are truly remarkable. They create soundscapes, and it is these soundscapes that make a situation, a place in time and space, real, exciting, emotional.
Soundscapes are actually quite important, and usually when you record something like we do now in this podcast, we now have one microphone and we're concentrating on the voice, which is also a very importantly emotional factor. But with the experiences that I'm working in, it's usually quite important to get the whole environment. For instance, in a hospital, all the incidental sounds are so important, and if it's done correctly and captured correctly, it really transports you there and gives you this feeling. In the same way, in a super sports car, when you go around a racetrack, it's just very, very impressive if it's captured right. And the whole experience of going with a race car around the racetrack with full power and experiencing this engineering can be very emotional too. The same way the experience of a classical music concert, it is about the experience of space. So the orchestra basically starts vibrating the air in this space, and this is what we're experiencing and what is essentially really, really emotional.
Recording a classical orchestra as an immersive sound environment is a fantastic journey of discovery. You're capturing a magic world, another world, out of the ordinary. Like in a Formula One car, or in an operating theatre, or a tropical rainforest. But these are also very, very private environments, almost holy spaces for the people who live in them. Capturing the Mahler Chamber Orchestra as an immersive experience is nothing like recording it on a traditional stereo CD for a record label. It's something much more intimate altogether. It's a privilege.
I think when an engineer would see what I do from Deutsche Grammophon, for instance, he would just purely look at me and say, like, you're doing this completely wrong. It's a very, very different approach, but also a very different goal. For the musicians, in a way different on the density of microphones and the closeness of microphones. It becomes also very intimate for them because it reveals such a detail on what they're usually not used to. And I guess you can hide yourself quite easily in an orchestra, specifically if you're like in the violin sections. If there's something happening, it might not be heard in between all these other violins. But now we're actually capturing this kind of high resolution, not just in the digital domain, but also in the space around us. So you can actually approach every single instrument and listen to the voice, which is very exciting for me. And it's also very revealing for all the musicians. Yesterday we also captured a solo piece from a cellist. It was really over the top, so we basically placed microphones everywhere around the cello where we could. So she still had some space to play, but everything else was covered in microphones basically. And the cellist then afterwards listened to the recording, and her comment was that it's actually very interesting because it's all the sounds that she's hearing when she's playing. All the sounds that the bow makes and all the notes and overtones in between that are being lost in a regular recording. And I think that's very interesting, and it's giving you then the opportunity to explore that. It is such a rich soundscape and such a spatial experience. And this is what we're trying to capture in the whole detail also. I really, really enjoy all these details that you get from instruments when you're close to them, and they just sound very much different. When you stand next to a violin that's being played strongly, it's always unbelievable for me on how much excitement from this small instrument comes and how loud it actually is.
Cellist Kayana Paco-Thierry, performing on that 3D recording. A demonstration by Henrik of how intense and emotional a close-up experience of performing can be. From exploring soundscapes, I love that phrase, let's turn to something else that has been fundamental to music for thousands of years. Well, at least since humans, or any other species for that matter, could produce sounds. Banging, blowing, singing. Once you have your VR goggles on and you're in the immersive environment, music is narrative. It's going to tell you a story. And just like in a bookshop, for example, these musical stories can be under the fiction or non-fiction sections. Fantasy, biography, sci-fi, romance, philosophy. And just maybe, as when you're in your favorite bookshop, time stands still and you start to dream.
It's pretty clear that the idea of VR and the idea of dreaming are not far apart. They're about the building and unbuilding of cognitive spaces.
American violinist Tim Summers, composer, teacher, computer programmer, quartet player, festival organizer, and a member of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra for many years now. With seemingly endless capacities for deep thought, Tim is unerringly bright and present, in more ways than a Mensa test could probably show, which makes him perfect for studying the mysteries of VR. He's part of a team at the Mahler Chamber Orchestra who have been working with Henrik Oppermann on our latest and most challenging VR experience, a piece of music by American composer Charles Ives titled The Unanswered Question. We will get into this piece in due course, but first, here's Tim's answer to a question you've already heard in this episode, and that's turning out to be far from easy to pin down. What is VR?
I don't know if that will go in the podcast, but fundamentally my view of it is a little dim. The first thing that pops in my mind is actually the upside down in Stranger Things. That there's something difficult there. There's some way that you could slip into something that you imagine is you and isn't. There's something really profound about the way it's addressing memory and sensation and what it means to be human right now. So I think it's actually a very massive experiment with cognition. Part of it is about tricking your senses. Part of it is about creating architectures in which you can imagine to live. Part of it is a trick mirror of where we imagine ourselves to live in reality. In this case, realism is being placed into this magic. I said magic, I meant to say massive computer architecture. So it's another form of realism. It's still going to be an illusion. And I can't pin it down, and I won't.
The Upside Down, a parallel world or alternate reality, from the phenomenally successful Netflix series Stranger Things. It exists alongside and sometimes underneath our own world, and looks in some ways very similar, but is most definitely not. The Upside Down is a very good analogy to the kind of VR experience that is not about faithfully recreating a hospital operating room or racing car cockpit or tropical forest or orchestra or any other moment of reality, but is more the possibility of being in an alternate story. Not the real world, but a dream world. Tim explains what goes on behind the scenes, so to speak, when an audience experiences a piece of music in the dream world of virtual reality.
So when you construct a dream world, when you engage with the dream piece, what you do is a little bit like the classic theater trick to have the people in the play go to a play, where you make sure that there's this kind of circularity between the viewers and the people on stage, which at the same time, it lets them know they're in an artificial situation, but it also makes them identify with the people on stage. So you're tricked both into believing and disbelieving at the same time.
You're listening now to Charles Ives' Unanswered Question, performed as an interactive VR experience, developed by Henrik Oppermann and the MCO. It will be released spring 2022. It's a masterpiece, not because of any fine complexities, but because of its simplicity. Written staggeringly enough over 100 years ago, the Unanswered Question represents a dream scenario. Comprised of three basic elements, a lonely trumpet asks the most famous and eternal question, who are we? Why do we exist? A group of four flutes, possibly representing humanity, attempt repeatedly and with increasing futility to answer the trumpet's question of existence. And in the background, a string quartet is the voice of the cosmos, unchanging, unreacting, and maybe even uninterested in the trumpet's question that remains unanswered.
In the first place, the piece itself is this sort of American transcendentalist fantasy, a little bit Unitarian. And the place where we filmed it is a church which I believe was a ruin until after the wall fell. It has this sort of empty religious space in which this transcendental piece can then be placed. The strings, who Ives write, can be offstage. They're actually on the altar in this case, and the wind's off to the side. The trumpet will appear and disappear with his question, because he can. That's the kind of thing you can do in a dream world. The three groups of musicians are interacting, but they're not understanding each other. There's something very nice about that. Like, it doesn't ask too much. It gives you the feeling that the problem of being in this dream world is that people understand each other just as poorly inside it as they do outside it. I think that will come across maybe even humorously. But it's not a joke. That sense of separation is also something that's very sharp in the virtual world. That you don't really know that the other things are there, or you really know they're not, even if you 80% believe it or 40% believe it. And there's some back and forth there. The role of the characters in Ives' piece, let alone Ives' piece in VR, is to express misunderstanding through this music, which almost communicates, but leaves you with a question. So I think the appearance and disappearance will be very much in line with the fact that the question is about existence, except in the dream world you can actually stop existing. And I think that will be a really interesting sort of flip side for this presentation.
Being a podcast, Between the Bars can't give you a visual experience of being inside Ives' music. You don't have a set of VR goggles over your eyes, and you're not walking through the ensemble finding your own take on the story between the trumpet, flutes and strings. But when it's finished, the Mahler Chamber Orchestra's interactive version of the unanswered question will allow you to do just that. I asked Henrik about the power of VR to interact with an audience.
If you're having a virtual reality experiences where you can walk around freely, you will always have a unique experience because you will be always somewhere different in space and you can move around freely. And that also means when you do it again, you can explore something completely different as well. So this is the whole exciting part about it. It's not like pressing play on a CD and you listen to the same piece again. The piece in itself will have infinite different ways of experiencing it through movement in space. So that's an inherent beauty in itself. You can either choose to be with your head maybe inside the violin, or you're just standing 10 meters away and you're experiencing the piece as a whole. So it's not just about intimacy, but also about the piece as a whole and your choice of perspective on what you want to explore. And this kind of granular interactivity is carrying this inherent beauty, which gives you all these varieties which are beautiful.
Granular interactivity. While I don't think musicians necessarily see themselves as grains of sand on a beach, they are part of a complex, ever-changing musical web that is the composition. The audience, on the other hand, traditionally sitting at a distance, hears the piece of music only as a whole, as a block of sound, travelling towards them through the plush acoustics of the concert hall. Tim Summers, being a musician, is on the granular side of the experience. He's in the web of music. His idea of VR and music is about experiencing it the way players do, from their chairs, from the driver's seat, or, if you play in an orchestra, the many drivers' seats.
If you move closer and you begin to hear what individuals are doing and what individuals are hearing, you'll begin to see something that you can't see from afar, which is how individuals are reacting from what they can hear from their position to support an ongoing whole. And so if you set yourself near a violinist toward the back, you're suddenly going to hear much less cello or viola, depending how you're sitting, much less winds. But what you might hear very clearly is suddenly if the flute plays something off in the distance that is quite clear, and then you have, or your person has the same thing next, you're going to hear much more what these interior relationships are and how they're defining a landscape for the piece. So the piece that comes across to you outside becomes made of all these interrelationships and reactions that you'll be able to hear inside.
You kind of get used to seeing your hands that are not your hands.
Yeah,
Hey,
have
there's
you ever
David.
tried the YouTube 360?
No.
VR experience?
No.
Because there are some artists recording YouTube videos
Oh, right.
in the VR environments. You can go around and look at the artists singing.
I know that that Ariana Grande has played concerts in Fortnite. She was obviously somewhere in Fortnite, and she did a concert that was publicized to happen at a certain time, and it got 12 million, I guess, views in that part of Fortnite.
Yeah, and they've done stuff like that also in what's called Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto, yes.
Yeah. And it's not only music; it's been people reading poetry.
Wow.
Acting different ways for an audience inside of a game.
Your head intersects with an object.
Back in my neighbour Martin's house, fumbling around on the cliffs, getting used to my hands, discussing the phenomena of performing arts such as music, acting and poetry starting to find a place in the virtual world of online gaming. In the future, will we start to live our everyday lives not on the web, but in the web? Meetings, education, fitness, concerts, dates, jobs. And is that future already soon here? My son Oliver, for example, has, I'm not joking, a virtual job as a pizza chef in Bloxburg, part of the Roblox online world. He's only 10. What does the future hold? Is it Keanu Reeves' Matrix or Mark Zuckerberg's Metaverse? Will live music become one of those endangered species of environment that Henrik Oppermann sound maps so as not to be lost forever? Or will we always need the real concert experience? Oliver loves baking virtual pizzas online, but he still comes to the dinner table at mealtimes. After all, you can't eat a virtual pizza. Here comes a few final sound bites to finish off our journey with Henrik, Tim, and the world of VR and classical music.
There's something happening in this motion toward a massive cognitive interior architecture of a society. I don't know what it is. It's larger than I can say. And I don't know if the metaverse as conceived commercially right now is the place where we end up. But it does mean there's going to be a massive amount of interest and curiosity and building in things which represent meaning in VR.
I guess with all these technologies that we have, and specifically also social media and the experiences that we're having online, we are facing a lot of issues, and we now realize in our society that these technologies have a political impact, and they have a huge impact on mental health, not just in adults, specifically also in young children, which we need to take serious.
It's easy to dream about what the technology can do, but the experience of technology, of actually programming, gives you a pretty stark sense of what the limitations are.
There is a lot of mindless content out there that lets you forget yourself and your surroundings, and it's, I guess, entertaining but also distracting from your whole life. And for me, it's important to go on a journey and create meaningful content which brings you closer to yourself in the end, and which makes you connect to culture and knowledge and to other minds somehow in the same way as you read a book.
Ooh.
You're in zero gravity, so
So I just float around. Oh my goodness, zero
you
gravity.
can just not walk around. It takes years to be an astronaut,
Oh yeah.
so you shouldn't feel bad.
No. I want to see out the window here. Whoa! Looking out the window here. You know what? I think I have to take it off because I start to feel a bit ill.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to sit down.
And there we pause till the next episode of Between the Bars. Before you go, there's something new to mention. Between the Bars now has an email address, podcast@marlachamber.com. Please tell us your questions, your thoughts, and what you'd like more or less of in the future. Many thanks to all musicians who performed this time round, and to Tim and Henrik for their insights, and to my neighbour Martin for guiding me safely through multiple virtual worlds. MCO Communications Manager Laura Thompson is taking a little time off for maternity leave. Thanks, Laura, for all your work, and see you back soon. Plus, this episode has been generously supported by the German federal government